Hello and welcome to episode 144 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Willingham. Welcome. This week, Lyft will incentivize drivers who drive EVs by paying them extra weekly fees. And they're also considering throwing in a free vomit shield for late-night rides.
Turns out the laser used in last week's fusion energy breakthrough was also used as a set in Star Trek. I'm glad to see the scientific community helping out Star Trek, but where they really need help is with the script writing.
Tokyo mandates solar on all new buildings. Unfortunately for their tiny hotel suites, this only requires a solar panel the size of the ones you find on calculators.
The U.S. Postal Service commits to 100% electric vehicles. Now your package will arrive with a lower carbon footprint. However, it'll still be late.
Plus, we'll have stories on the chip shortage not going away, and why Americans should buy an EV in the next 2 months, and solar on an abandoned nuclear power plant site. All that and more on this special year-end edition of the Clean Energy Show.
Yes, I would like to call this the year-end spectacular. That's how it's going to be.
Okay, the year-end spectacular of the Clean Energy Show.
Yeah, which basically means we're going to go long this week.
Okay. Brian, we're late this week. Why are we late, Brian? Why are we many days late? Why are our fans craving our show and unable to get their fix of the Clean Energy Show until now?
Yes, well, I have a long story to tell about travel, winter travel here in the wilds of Western Canada. We were going to be one day late for the podcast because I was traveling, but it ended up to be several days late. But yeah, we had a lovely trip to Jasper, Alberta, Canada, which is in the Rocky Mountains of Canada. It's an absolutely beautiful place. Have you been to Jasper?
I've camped at Jasper at Pocahontas Campground in the north, and I've been through there. It is probably, well, the locals like it better than Banff because it's just less touristy. But it's also known for its highway in the winter being shut down due to dynamiting avalanches. You know, it's not an easy, they call it the Icefields Highway or Parkway, rather.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It is less touristy because it's harder to get to. Like Banff is quite close to Calgary, but Jasper is almost a 4-hour drive from Edmonton, which is the closest major city. So, you know, we were talking, recently in France, they have sort of banned some short haul flights because those can be covered by trains and, we need to all be flying less. But yeah, we had to make this calculation of how to get there because it's like an 8-hour drive to Edmonton and then a 4-hour drive to Jasper. So if we drove it, that's 12 hours. It's a bit too long. Mm-hmm. Everyone else in my family has things to do, like, exams, and
they're not retired.
I'm retired. Yeah.
You're just a retired old man. You could do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, but we thought, well, we better fly, and that'll save us a couple of days because people have things to do. So you fly to Edmonton, you rent a car, you drive that to Jasper. So that worked fairly well on the way there, although it was starting to get cold, and our flight was delayed a couple of hours out of Regina. So, it was kind of slow to get there. Yeah. But we picked up the rental car, and I wanted to talk a bit about that too, because, obviously we talk about EVs a lot on the show, and we love EVs, and you and I were in it, though, a bit of a EV bubble. Like that tends to be all we think about and talk about. But I just wanted to say, I sort of, sometimes you forget the niceties of just a really nice car. So there was 4 of us, so we got this large Kia Sorento SUV. It's a 7-seater SUV, this very big vehicle. And it was great, like it made me think like, obviously EVs are the way to go, and we're obviously transitioning to EVs, but you can kind of understand why somebody would get into a Kia Sorento and think, yeah, this is fine. We don't need an EV. This works great. It's a brand new car, only took half a tank of gas on all the way to Jasper.
Really?
Even though it was like this large SUV. Yeah, everything worked great on it. I mean, contrast, a couple of months ago, we rented a Toyota Corolla for something, and that was less good. I don't know, Toyota Corolla, it's an inexpensive car, so you get what you pay for, but I was kind of surprised how crappy it was.
I used to admire Corollas all my life. Yeah. I used to admire the car my son has, which is a Honda Civic, like 20 years old. I would have admired that, because I've had these really crappy cars in my life. But I did rent one. I did rent a Corolla when we hit a deer a number of years ago. Yeah. And I was thinking, this isn't...
No.
Because the Corolla and the Prius, the cost of ownership is equal or better for the Prius. So if you just spend the extra money and get the Prius, you get so much more.
Yeah.
And then you pay that much less in gas and everything. Yeah. So I recommend you think about the cost of ownership when you buy a car.
Yeah, and more upfront for the Prius, but probably cheaper in the long run. And then we ended up renting a Toyota RAV4 for the drive home, which I'll explain that in a bit. But so then we had another experience with another car, a brand new RAV4, and that was decent, although I could never hook up do Toyotas even have like CarPlay, Apple CarPlay, or...
That's a good question because they've avoided that. I will say though that the ones that got into it do have the Apple and not the Android, but now they have both. Right? But that surprises me because I would have thought all new Toyotas have both now. But was it older?
No, it was brand new. But
really?
Like on the Kia Sorento, the Apple CarPlay hooked up right away. It was great, so we were able to use Google Maps on the navigation. The Toyota, it said something about you got to download the Toyota app to connect with your car.
Oh,
and I was like,
what? Toyota. Okay, so this
I did that, and then it was like
shows you what they're like, man. With the EVs, this is indicative of everything they do.
And they're just kind of slow to change. The other thing we noticed was like we were driving away from the rental place in the RAV4, and we were like, oh wait, did we forget the keys? Where are the keys? Where's the key fob? Maybe we drove away without the key fob. And then after 5 minutes of looking, we realized it was in the ignition. You have to put it in the ignition and turn the key.
Did they start it for you and you just got in?
They did. They started it for us
the way the world used to work?
Yeah. Which is actually kind of nice. It's kind of nice to actually have a place to put the key.
Sure.
But also my knee was bumping against it. It just seemed super old-timey. Yeah. But so I did download this app that Toyota wanted me to download. And then it was like, okay, set up your account with Toyota in order to connect. And I'm like, what? And then you needed like a VIN number or... It said you could like a
type,
QR code,
GNA profile, DNA profile. Yeah.
And it said that you can shoot like there's a VR code or a QR code on the screen, but I couldn't get the QR code. And then they were like, okay, enter the VIN number. And at that point, I gave up. So anyway, the Kia Sorento, really loved it. It was great, but you still got those gasoline car negatives, which is by the time we got to Jasper. And so, by the way, like the weather... The day before the wedding, so we were there for my sister-in-law was getting married. She got married to an F-18 fighter pilot guy.
Oh, no.
I mean, he doesn't do that anymore, but...
Oh, okay. That's good. Because, we only have like 6 F-18s in the Canadian military, and they may go off somewhere. And
why it's kind of a big deal, you know? So,
it is a big deal. They're the elite of the elite if there's only 6 of them or something like that.
But so congratulations to Alex and Dan. Lovely wedding. And the day before the wedding, so this was going to be an outdoor wedding. This was their plan, an outdoor wedding in Jasper in the middle of the winter because it's cool. It's beautiful.
Was there an F-18 flying over, with colored dye coming out of it or smoke?
But the day before the wedding, it was -5 Celsius and sunny. Like it was perfect the day before the wedding.
Really?
And then the day of the wedding, it dropped to -20 and windy. So the wedding could not be held outdoors. We had to go to the backup location in the Jasper Park Lodge and have it indoors. So yeah, it got super frigid, midway through the trip. So, starting up the Kia Sorento, it started fine and everything, but it took so long to warm up. Like gas cars just take so long to warm up.
Yeah.
We went into Jasper to fill it up with gas. It's like people say, one of the advantages of gas cars is they're so quick to fill up. But I got to tell you, when it's -40, it does not feel quick.
Nothing feels quick at -40
and
when you're filling up an SUV, yeah.
With the Tesla, if we'd had the Tesla, and by the way, there's Tesla Superchargers on Main Street in Jasper.
There wasn't before, but there is now.
There wasn't before. You would hop out of the car, plug it in, get back in your car.
And that's all you do, by the way, people. When you own a Tesla, it knows your car, knows your account.
It's all connected, but you just have to plug it in and you can get back in your car. But, filling it up with gas, it's -40 out. I mean, it was like 30 something and windy. So it was, and you're fumbling with the credit card and the gas pump.
No,
And,
yeah, and the Shell that I go to, and then I haven't done this in a long time, thank Jesus, is I used to fill up the car at a Shell station, and it was so slow. Every step,
Yeah.
Would you like a car wash? Yes, no. Would you like to enter your air miles? Yes, no. And it didn't come up quickly, and then the colder it was, the longer it took for the LCD screen to display.
Yeah, the displays on the pump are always kind of half frozen.
No.
And then God forbid something goes wrong with your credit card and you have to do it again or, whatever.
So basically you couldn't get a flight back for, 45 an hour flight away from us?
Yeah.
From home?
It's a 1 hour flight. And so then on the way back, we drove the Kia Sorento back to Edmonton. We went to the airport. This was, the cold weather was starting to set in, and on the West Coast, there's been blizzards and stuff. So, Vancouver had it worse, probably Seattle as well, where massive blizzards in Vancouver. And so, we're nearby to Vancouver, and a lot of planes are coming from Vancouver. So the delays start to happen, the cancellations start to happen. Mm-hmm. We got to the airport and we thought we were good because we were there like a couple hours before the flight, and it was still on the board. It was still on time.
Oh, dear.
We went through the check-in process and we got to our gate, and then it was just a sort of a series of announcements about delay. We were there for 4 hours, and then after announcing all these delays, it's like, oh, sorry, your flight's canceled. Bye. See you later.
So question, though, about, is it hard to get a one-way rental? I mean, because you're not taking the car back. So how does that work? Is it more expensive? Do they let you do it? Does it depend where you're going?
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. Just a couple more things about the airport I thought were interesting. So we're standing there waiting at the gate, and there's all these announcements for all these flights, and they're saying things like, oh, well, the pilot is here, but the crew's not here. They're coming in on a flight from somewhere, and so that's delayed, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a flight supposed to be leaving for Saskatoon. It was minus 35, and so they're like, okay, well, we can't board yet because the plane is too cold.
Oh, no.
And I don't know if the heater on the plane was broken or something, or I'm not sure what, but they said, oh, we got to hook up a heat cart to the plane and warm it up before people can get on. And so there's some kind of external heater that they hook up to these planes. And so they kept giving these announcements. It's like, oh, okay, well, we can't board until it's 10 Celsius inside the plane, and we're up to 4 Celsius now.
My guess is they would have to run the engines on the tarmac at great expense to heat up the plane. And my guess is also that it would be a slow process to get it from minus 30 or whatever it was to room temperature. So they probably have to use
it'd be like warming
propane.
up a car. They'd have to use all this jet fuel to warm it up. So they use these external heaters, I guess. But it was like, okay, well, it's now 6 degrees inside the plane. We could almost board. I assume that flight was eventually canceled.
6 degrees Celsius, which is room temperature is about 20. Wow. And you know what, Brian, a lot of people across the continent are having these problems moved from west to east and went on after you. And lots of people listening, I'm sure, are dealing with this.
Yeah. And, it speaks to clean energy again, because, the same things that apply to electric cars versus gas cars apply to, gasoline airplanes. And there's advantages in the cold weather to gasoline type fuel, and there's also disadvantages.
Well, I imagine if they were electric, they would have got out the combustion heater as well to heat it quickly.
Yeah, or, you just, who knows? But anyway, so they canceled our flight and didn't tell us anything about what to do. So we're like, okay, well, we got to scramble and get a hotel nearby. So, we ended up spending 2 days, stuck for 2 days at the hotel, the Radisson Airport Hotel in Edmonton. And we had booked the flights through a travel agent. So one of the benefits of that is that they have to deal with these problems.
Really? You booked through a travel agent?
Yeah. It's just like an online travel agent
thing. It's not like you're
so
traveling around the world. You're hopping to the next city pretty much. Like, why would you use a travel agent?
It's a perk we have with a points card that we've got, and,
Okay. So you decided to drive instead.
Yeah, well, we tried to get them to rebook the flight, and the best they could do was December 24th in trying to rebook.
Really?
Which is tomorrow.
They're not paying for your hotel, are they?
I don't think so. I mean, we're going to get a refund, and maybe we'll get a hotel credit or something like that.
Oh, God, I couldn't.
We have like this, passenger rights thing in Canada now. So, they're not supposed to totally be able to screw you over anymore, but I don't know. We'll see how that goes. There was one and when we were finally leaving the hotel on the morning that we left, this lady came into the hotel with her luggage and she said, "I'm back. I was at the airport and they canceled my flight again. So I got to check in again."
That's not good. And it's Christmas. It's the worst time of year.
Yeah. So we were going to have to spend 4 more days to waiting for the rebooked flight. So, you start looking into rental cars, and we quickly discovered that everybody was basically outlawing one-way rentals because they would have had no more rental cars left in Edmonton, right?
Because the flights are canceled, they're going to be out of cars. I see.
Everybody starts calling the car rental places because these are drivable distances for us here in the West. So, nobody would give us a one-way car rental either. And you try and book online and, same thing, one-way rental. Nope, not allowed. So what we ended up doing was we went online to Enterprise and booked a 2-week rental for the car. And the idea being that I would drive it back to Edmonton in 2 weeks.
Are you insane? Why?
Well, again, I'm the retired guy. I've got nothing better to do.
Jesus, Brian. Really?
So, and there was 4 of us, everybody wanted to get back for Christmas and everything. So I thought, well, what the heck? 2 weeks from now, I could drive the car back to Edmonton if I had to, hoping that we could work something out where I wouldn't have to do that. But anyway, so yeah, we went to pick up the car at Enterprise. We had it booked for 8 a.m. And we said, okay, well, this is our plan. We're going to drive it back in 2 weeks, but we'd rather just drop it in Regina. Is it possible you could, do that? And so they fiddled around with the computer and they found a car that they were going to allow that for. There's a bit of an extra charge because apparently they replate the car, they put Saskatchewan plates on it once it arrives, or so I think we still kind of lucked out that they had found a car that they were willing to let go on the one-way journey. But maybe there's other people stuck in Regina that need to get to Edmonton, so maybe there's a massive
Yeah, I think I saw some on the news actually.
Yeah. So that's what we did at the airport. Shout out to Enterprise Car Rental. They saved Christmas for us. It was a Christmas miracle. I don't have to drive back to Edmonton 2 weeks from now. They let us do this one-way rental. We did an 8-hour drive yesterday and made it. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to mention about the car rental. When you rent the car on the website, it says, do you want to offset the carbon from your car rental? And it's basically an extra charge. How much do you think they charge to offset the carbon on your rental?
Is it a one-time fee or a kilometer fee?
It's just a one-time fee.
$50.
No, it was $1.25. I don't know.
That's one seedling, maybe.
I guess one seedling is better than nothing, but that seemed unusually low.
Well,
but,
why wouldn't you?
It is something.
Just if it made you, if you believed that, if you bought into that, then yeah, that's great. $1.25 to not have any emissions.
But it is something I want to look into further because I do want to take some flights in the next few years now that I'm retired, and I would like to offset that carbon in some kind of way. But yeah, that's my long.
Wow, that is something very. I wanted you to take a train for part of it, so you'd have a trains, planes, and automobile story for the rest of your life. You could tell at parties. That's right.
But apparently, Vancouver was so much worse. There was one airplane that the people were stuck for 13 hours on the tarmac.
Oh, man, that is everyone's worst nightmare,
It's it's torture. That's should not be allowed.
No, it shouldn't. I don't think it is allowed. I think they've passed laws against it, haven't they? Isn't it 2 hours, 3 hours or something? That's the max?
Yeah. There's a law. They don't follow it. I heard the passengers had to resort to cannibalism.
Well, you start to think that guy looks pretty tasty over there. After 13 hours, you've been eyeing him up.
Yeah, well, they went through all the nuts and pretzels on the airplane.
That sucks. That sucks. And the pilots you'd think would be like, I can't fly now. I've just sat here for 13 hours. I can't fly across the country for 5 hours. Come on. That doesn't seem to work out either. After
a couple hours, you got to just call it and go back to the gate.
Just even if you have to board off one of those little ladder trucks, just get off and walk on the tarmac into the airport.
Yeah. I'm thinking if that ever happens to me, I'll just fake a heart attack or something, and then they'll have to let us
a
out.
heart attack.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Stockton and his retirement strategies, tips so you can book one day, fake a heart attack on a plane. Let's talk about my worries and woes. I have a Prius as our main car right now. I've been trying to replace it with an EV, right? The Prius is now, like I said, almost 6 years old. Our 5-year lease ran out last spring, and I was thinking, 5 years, man, that's too long when we leased it. EVs I'll be wanting to get an EV. Didn't work out because there's just not enough stock around, and Tesla's, the Model 3 was in fact not $35,000. And they've gone up ever since in price. So that wasn't doable, and the other people didn't follow suit too well. Anyway, so I'm still looking for an EV, and that's my situation. However, we had a scare with the Prius, a mechanical scare, which I've never had before. Now, we've never had the Prius for more than 5 years before, but nothing has gone wrong. Like nothing. Yeah. Nothing. Rock solid. Like every little knob and everything, every hook, every cup holder, everything is perfect on those vehicles, and that's why I like them. However, my wife heard a gurgling sound in the cabin a couple of months ago. And so the way a combustion engine works is you have antifreeze that circulates through the engine with a water pump. Otherwise, the friction from the way a combustion engine works with pistons rubbing against metal up and down, that it gets too hot. But they use that in the cabin to heat it. So there's a little radiator in the cabin and a fan that blows. So that's your waste heat from gasoline being only up to 20 to 27% efficient. Electric cars, of course, are 90% efficient, but you get to use that waste heat. And in an electric car, you need to use 5,000 watts to heat the sucker, Yeah. So I checked the antifreeze reservoir, and it was empty. Or empty-ish, and that's a bad thing because that goes into the engine as well. So I was a problem. We had to fill it with antifreeze, and it kept leaking, and there was nothing on the ground. So I looked it up, and of course, the first thing I find is head gasket gone, and it's beyond the 5-year warranty.
Yeah, that happened to me once on my Datsun.
Oh, well, that's a very old car from very old times. But did you get it fixed, or did you blow it up for your phone?
Wasn't crazy expensive when I remember.
Well, it's thousands of dollars. I looked up $4,000, and I didn't. The only thing that let me sleep at night was the fact that the car is worth so ridiculously much used that we could finally sell it and just turn it over, and we wouldn't really lose money on it or anything at all. We'd still gain money for a down payment on a new car, even if it was another Prius. However, it turns out, and this is a fluke, so in a Prius, there's a catalytic converter. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, rather. But the fluid actually goes through the catalytic converter on a Prius. And the reason is this is an engineering play to increase the fuel economy. So because the catalytic converter is full of precious metals, people are stealing them, by the way, off of Priuses because they're oversized. So they're stealing them off of Priuses. I've seen lots of videos on YouTube of people doing it really quickly. 20 seconds, they steal the sucker. A minute, they pump it up in the middle of the night, and it's gone. And it's a lot of money. So hopefully they don't steal mine. My son said it wouldn't be ironic if they stole it just before you got it fixed, or just after you got it fixed. Anyway, so basically they have to replace the catalytic converter because there's a fluid loop that goes through it. The antifreeze actually runs a fluid loop through the catalytic converter to keep it cool. And without getting too technical, it's because they have to change, combustion cars have to change the mixture of gasoline. They have to over mix the gasoline with the air to cool down the catalytic converter. So there's sensors in your catalytic converter, O2 sensors that keep it, and temperature sensors to keep it within a certain range. So they have to reduce the fuel economy by increasing the mixture. Well, the Prius doesn't have to do that. It can keep a pretty fine mixture most of the time because it's cooling it in the fluid loop. Another advantage of that is it heats the cabin quicker because the catalytic converter heats up instantly. You don't have to wait for the engine block to heat, which is a big thing. The catalytic converter, the smoke, the exhaust that goes out of those things, heats them up quickly. So then your cabin ostensibly heats up quicker. So that's what's leaking, and it's leaking into the gas. The mechanic apparently, after long searches, actually sniffed the gas, sniffed the exhaust, and said that it was in there. So, but my wife, and if I was there, I would have said, what are you doing? But she said, is it covered under warranty? And because they gave her a price of $2,000. And I've got problems with the other car. I don't need this. We got a kid going on a trip. And we were just, strapped. But they said, it might be. And one guy went to another guy, and another guy went to another guy, and eventually talked to the manager. And the manager said, yeah, it definitely is. We've had these before. Because it's part of the hybrid system, I guess, which is guaranteed for 8 years on most cars that have hybrid systems. They consider this part of the hybrid system. So it's guaranteed. Or I hope so anyway. I hope they don't change their mind.
What a relief.
But yeah, it's a huge relief. It's like a Christmas miracle because we almost took back the kids' Christmas presents. Not literally, but it would have been a lean Christmas. That's for sure. So that's great. And speaking of which, I had it on Twitter with who, and I canceled my Cybertruck reservation. And let's face it, Brian, there's no chance. I don't care how long he takes to get the Cybertruck out. There's no chance I can afford one. But I've also lost faith in just the fact that the Cybertruck isn't a stupid idea. Like I don't have faith in him anymore, in Mr. Musk.
Yeah.
And maybe it is, but I'm not, I kind of relied on him to say that, yeah, this is a good idea, but it could be a complete bust for all I know. Doesn't matter. I have no money to buy the Cybertruck. So it was just wishful thinking, and I took my $150 Canadian back and I bought a gift for my wife.
Nice.
So yeah, which I'll be talking about because it has to do with hydroponic gardening.
Okay. So growing weed then. Is that
sure.
what it is?
Exactly. Which you could do in Canada. Also, we talked a lot about you going to the next city over Saskatoon a lot and there being a Tesla Supercharger there for when it is really cold. And by the way, in Denver, it went from +5 Celsius to -15, so 20 degrees Celsius in 1 hour. I mean, that's the homeless people were caught off guard and the infrastructure must have frozen. They call that a flash freeze. And that yesterday and the day before, I think it's been happening all across. But anyway, the superchargers in the one city that we have between our two major cities where we live went kaput except for one stall with two cables. But yeah, this is an issue across all the third-party chargers as well. But what happened here is that someone made a call and they got fixed in a day. They're all working now for Christmas because people were anxious because a lot of people going back and forth for Christmas and they need these things to work or they can't make the trip.
Well, I would be worried about that too. With Tesla being headquartered in California, you would be worried that they maybe not have enough people here to be able to do that.
Well, they must have had either people who are floating around because there's so many superchargers or their own techs. Yeah. I don't know if the techs at the shop in Saskatoon can actually do it, but they fixed them instantly, and that's great. Wow. Because everywhere else says, well, we've got to order in parts for 2 months or 6 weeks, and all these other kinds of chargers. So, yeah, and speaking of Denver, Out of Spec Reviews, the YouTube channel that I like, because it went down to -30, I think last night, he's testing all kinds of things. He's got Teslas, he's got Kias, he's got old Leafs that he's let get cold. And he's testing the charging speed and the range because, they don't get to do that. We get this all the time where we live, but Denver doesn't always get such an extreme. So he's like using the opportunity. He stayed up all night to do this so that he can do all these tests. And now he's going to make a fortune off the YouTube content. But yeah, he'll be able to test it out and we'll see how that goes. He did say that a cold Tesla that's just been sitting there in -30. Well, it wasn't always -30. We could just sitting there without any heater plugged in. He said it wouldn't charge right away. So it took an hour to sort of get the system going to heat up the battery enough that it would even start charging. And of course, batteries charge slower in the winter because they're cold. They can't accept a charge that fast.
And you can leave your electric car for a few days unplugged if you have to, but you shouldn't. So as we went to Jasper, I left my Tesla plugged into our home charger. I just sort of set the charge level at 50%. So it didn't need to charge while we were gone, but it could always draw from the juice from the house to, keep the battery warm as it dropped to -30.
Well, this is kind of sad, Brian, because we've always advertised ourselves as the experts on cold weather, because it gets down to -40 here. So the cold weather EV experts of the worldwide ones. Better than Norway, better than Alaska. Well, Denver's got some testing to do too. But he said that all the Electrified America chargers were not working. All of them. Because they're only good to a certain temperature.
What?
It's like minus 16, minus 20 or something. I might have it later in the show. I'll check my notes.
That doesn't make sense.
But no, they said they didn't work. They were only rated to that. So he knew that. You know, it's minus 32 or something here today as well. And that's not even including the wind, which is making it, you know, ungodly, uninhabitable. We should not be here. We should be in Hawaii now. We should be.
This is terrible.
Let's see here. I think my Leaf is unplugged. My Nissan Leaf, my electric car, is unplugged because for some reason it charges when it heats the battery. So the battery heater comes on at minus 17 Celsius to minus 20 Celsius, which is quite cold. Okay, so it comes on and it cycles off at minus 12 once it heats up to minus 12. But for some reason, it can't operate it unless the car is charging. And it's not just my car. It's the Leafs. I even assume that the new Leafs, because they act pretty much the same way that way. So if you're just leaving your car, then it charges up to 100%, regardless of what you set it to charge to. And of course, you don't want to leave an electric car at 100% because that stresses the battery for any length of time. So what I've been doing, Brian, is I've been unplugging it and plugging it back in because I'm not using it because the heater isn't working. So we use, if another car is around, I'll just use the Prius or whatever to make shopping trips. So I have been unplugging it. So it'll use, it could go for, I think, 3 days heating the battery. And then I just plug it back in and let it go up again to 100% and then unplug it. And yeah, that's what I have to do. Fortunately, other cars are not like that, but the Leaf is kind of wonky in that way. And speaking of it,
and it's still cold in the Leaf because your heater, the cabin heater is broken.
No heater. Still looking at the diesel heater. It's a sad thing. Okay, it's a sad thing. But I've been managing. I did have a hard time the other day because it was frost on the inside of the window. It was like minus 28 or something Celsius, and I had frost on the inside. Whenever you scrape the frost off, it just falls onto the dash as snow.
Yeah, it's like
essentially, and then that just evaporates in the sun or whatever, goes right back on the window again if you don't have any heat blowing on it. So I and my scraper, for some reason, the inside of the window doesn't scrape very well. So it's like little lines, scratching little lines in there, trying to see and get my daughter at school. But yeah, school is over for now for a while. Anyway, I made it. My sun-tempered house, my house built as a passive solar house, though, the other day was minus 32 and the furnace did not have to come on. It was heated above the temperature thanks to the sun just shining in the south windows and the fact that the house is decently insulated. Modern houses, I always say when I bring this up, are much more insulated than my passive solar house.
And if you're new to the show, James lives in a passive solar, like a 2-story house that was designed as passive solar, lots of windows facing south, super thick walls, based on a design from, I guess, the 1970s here in Saskatchewan. And there was a handful of these houses built, and James was lucky enough to get
thanks to the 70s oil crisis, they decided to study it in a house called Saskatchewan House, and this was sort of built after that. It skimped out a bit on some of the insulation, but they did things like double 2x4 offset stick construction so that there'd be no thermal bridging. You wouldn't have a direct contact between the indoors and outdoors and that things. And they came up with the heat exchanger there. For that house, they invented a heat exchanger, which is now used around the world in your house as well.
Yeah.
So some updates to past stories. The guy in Denver, the Out of Spec Reviews YouTube channel guy, says the new Electrify America BTC charging stations do not work below 0 Fahrenheit, which is minus 17. He said, make sure you're not relying on one of these new stations for the next few days. And these are brand new, Brian. These are brand new, and they're not working below that. So that's BS. You got to give it to Tesla, Brian. If Tesla went completely bonkers, they could be the world's ubiquitous charging network, because they got that right, didn't they?
No, the charging network is like, the uptime is kind of amazing.
And they are starting to open that up to other people.
And apparently, when they are broken, someone can get to them and fix them like quickly.
Apparently, which is not always the case with everyone else. So they got to figure that out.
Okay, so another update. So we were talking last episode about the fusion energy breakthrough, which we went quite deep into. But there was a little detail that showed up here on Bloomberg that I just thought was interesting. The laser that they used for this experiment was in the movie Star Trek Into Darkness. They needed a location for that movie. And it was at this,
Really?
the National Ignition Facility lab where this laser is that they used for this fusion reaction. It's in the movie Star Trek Into Darkness. I thought that was kind of wild.
What year was that? Was that like 10 years ago?
That one is about 10 years ago,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the modern Star Trek movies, but the laser was around then, and it's a military operation. I'm surprised they got in and used it.
Yeah. And it's, possibly my favorite thing about this fusion stuff is that it always does look kind of cool. Like these giant, they really look like movie props. They look like movie sets. They look like science fiction. It's maybe not practical as an energy source, but, damn cool.
Not yet, anyway. Seems like it's gonna be a while. So if you are in the United States, and most of you are, we know that, who listen to our show, as most shows have a largest audience in the United States, go buy an EV now if you're thinking about buying one, because not right now, but in January 1st or February, the first 2 months or so will get you a tax credit for all brands, because you're going to have to look into this yourself, but some American-built EVs, we just found out, that aren't eligible for the tax credit now, like the Bolt EV, may be able to claim half that credit, perhaps, when, because the new tax credit says that your EV has to have its minerals sourced in the United States or countries that it has free trade with, which is Canada and a bunch of other countries, and I don't think China counts, but it doesn't, and that's a problem. So if your batteries are built in China, as a lot of them often are, that can be a problem. So yeah, check about the EVs that you want to buy, the brand you want to buy, and look into that, because apparently the government just said that we'll figure it out in March. We're going to need until March to figure this out, to see which EVs, because it's hard to figure out how much of your car comes from the United States and how much of it comes from outside a free trade zone or something like that.
So is this like an interim ruling?
This is an interim ruling that they don't even have an exact date, but if you are looking to buy a car, know that you're probably going to get a better tax credit than you might otherwise get. Now, it might be the same depending on which brand you buy, but the U.S. automakers are struggling to get up to speed on this, because they're going to have to shift their supply chains in order to make sure that they. Some of them may not even try entirely, but in order to get the full tax credit, which they're going to want to have, they're going to have to change things around. That's not going to happen overnight. It could be a year or so, or longer, before you're able to get that same tax break again. So if you're thinking about, if you're on the fence, look into that.
Yeah. So story here from The Guardian. There's been some concern that emissions in the EU might go up this year because of, all the problems with Russia and trying to get off Russian gas. And so there have been some coal plants that have been kind of fired up again, or increased their output because of the energy concerns going on in Europe. So there was some concern that the emissions for Europe this year were going to go up, but it turns out they did not. So there was some coal brought online that had not, they weren't expecting to, but the EU has been doing apparently enough other things with their regulations that overall the emissions still did go down this year, which is great news.
That is great news. And this is, the Russian invasion of Ukraine changed things around, and still they were able to manage an emissions reduction, which is very interesting. I mean, I don't think we know exactly why that is. They probably are still looking into that. These things take time.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
Well, we know that the EU has been more strict on things like vehicle emissions. So, presumably all the kind of legislation that they've been working on for the last few years is starting to pay off. That's
Well,
good news.
that's incredible if it is, Brian. I mean, that's because we look for that to happen down the road. And if we start to see that, then that's pretty exciting stuff.
And it can be frustrating as, those of us who watch this closely and watch it every day, because, these kinds of agreements get made all the time of, agreements made, rules made to reduce emissions. But, overall, you still kind of see oil use creeping up a lot of the time, and it can be discouraging. But, we're trying to get the entire planet to move on all of this. And unfortunately, it just takes time.
Okay, well, I have something that tickles my fancy here. It is somebody who drove past a Tesla semi-truck and opened his window and recorded it. So I have the recording for you.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what it's like to drive by a semi with your window up, right? It's a noisy experience.
Oh, it's awful.
And this is, I would say, a little above city speed, not quite freeway speed, sort of expressway speed or something like that in the city. The start of the recording is the window's down and he opens it immediately, so it gets a bit louder. But this is what it sounds like. I mean, that's it. That's freaking it.
It sounds like nothing.
Are you shaking?
Yeah, I think
there's so many advantages to EVs that are just side advantages. Like, imagine a world where it's not frighteningly noisy.
We forget how we just get used to it, right? Like, I grew up in a house right near a highway, and you just get used to that awful sound of semi-trucks all day and all night. And we don't have to live with that in the future.
I live near a highway that comes to the end because I live at the edge of the city. So the highway comes to the end and the semis slow down and they use their engine brakes, even though the signs tell them there's a fine if you do. Well, guess what? They don't give a F.
Yeah.
And those engine brakes are expensive. What they do is they use the engine instead of the brake pads to slow the truck down. So it's making the truck, the engine sort of fight the wheels. It's connected to the wheels and then the engine's working in reverse or whatever, and it's just fighting and it's just noisy as heck if the wind is coming from that, and it's hell. But you know what? Electric trucks like the Tesla Semi don't have engines to do that. They have regenerative braking, the same things you and I have in our electric cars, which is great for them. It's great for going down steep grades and not wearing out your brake pads or your engine. Because it's you don't have to gear down when you're going down those grades and make a mistake, because that's apparently something that happens. And that's why you see runoffs for Tesla, for brake runoffs for semis. Well, the regenerative braking just makes more electricity. It makes the motors work in reverse and charges your battery up with your heavy load and is relatively quiet.
Well, I drove to Vancouver about 2 years ago in the early days of the podcast in my Tesla, and I drove through the Rocky Mountains. And I would always watch the regenerative braking when I was going down a mountain. And, I had it set to range on the thing. And the range one time going down a mountain jumped up 5 kilometers.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because, it probably wasn't 5 kilometers up the next mountain, or something similar. Yeah. Even in the Prius, you can do that. You can watch the regenerative braking work too. So that's cool. Nice. Now we used to do that in the mountains all the time. So the U.S. Postal Service is sort of reversing their course on electrification.
Yeah, this is a story we've covered every few months here on the show. Of course, advocates for clean energy have been arguing that the U.S. Postal Service should go hard on electric vehicles. They came out with a very wishy-washy, started out as maybe 20% electric vehicles as they're looking to replace their fleet. They have a gigantic fleet of vehicles in the U.S. Postal Service, which, are coming due for replacement. Anyway, so they have, increased the amount of electric vehicles a little bit over time. And now they have finally given in and gone to 100% electrical purchases for vehicles starting in 2026. So 75% of vehicles in the next few years. And then by 2026, it's going to have to be 100% electric.
That's good. It'd be stupid. Let's put it this way. It'd be stupid not to, because that sort of sector they have it now. They have the trucks, they have the technology. It's shorter range. And it makes financials, you're wasting money if you don't go EV. That's the situation we're in with small local, short haul trucking, let's call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be stupid not to.
No, and the only issue might be supply of them, but of course everybody's ramping up, and with the Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S., that is encouraging all industry to ramp up production of all kinds of electric vehicles, so this should be doable.
I noticed one of the suppliers might be Oshkosh Defense, like a defense contractor. That's kind of weird. So they're building electric vehicles for the post office? Why not like Ford or somebody else? Or
I mean, if someone gives them $1 billion... why not?
So they recently pledged to go 40% EV, and the new purchase plan gets them to 75% by 2026. You know, Brian, the year changes in a couple of days to 2023. Mm-hmm. And then 2026 is going to look awfully close, isn't it? It's going to look pretty close.
Yeah, that's right. I
also change the number on your checks when you're signing checks at the grocery store.
Right.
As if you do that.
Checks that I write constantly.
When was the last time you wrote a check? You probably have. I haven't.
2 hours
really?
ago. Long story.
Okay, we won't get into it. So we've been talking about solar farms on formal coal plants, which is cool because what they do is they use the infrastructure that's there because you have a coal power plant. You need to build a whole bunch of power transformers and power lines to connect to the rest of the grid. So it's kind of convenient to do that. Well, I found an example of where they're doing it on an abandoned nuclear power plant. The site of the project is the Rancho Seco, a former SMUD nuclear facility that was taken offline in 1989 after a series of troublesome incidents and a vote of no confidence from the public. So the public basically had enough and said no, and they shut the sucker down, which seems inconceivable now.
Well, 1989, that was the year The Simpsons started, so maybe that had something to do with it.
You know, I've seen videos where they talk about The Simpsons has not helped the nuclear industry. The people actually think about that. I didn't. Yeah. But you know, three-eyed fish and all that. So the 2,000-acre site was eventually repurposed for the Consum's natural gas power plant, which is still there, but they also now have added 1,000 megawatts of, 160 megawatts of solar, in addition to the 1,000 megawatts of natural gas. So yeah, very interesting. And why not? You have the property, and apparently there was some property there to put all this stuff up. So why not? Why not add solar and make use of the utility? No,
we need grid connections for all this clean energy, and they often already exist.
Well, let's get into some of our main stories of the show before you know, the new year happens. And we may have a New Year's countdown if we keep going long on the show, but let's go.
Hey, it's the year-end spectacular. We're going long. So this is a story from Electric Autonomy Canada. Study shows EV's potential to increase utility revenues, but reduce customer costs. So this is a study that happened in California. And basically the gist of this is that, particularly in California, there are lots of electric vehicles now. So basically electricity consumption has gone up. Like this is a natural thing. But utilities in California and here in Canada, most places are heavily regulated. Like they operate often as a monopoly. So since they're a monopoly, you know, you don't want to let them just charge whatever rates they want. If it was a true monopoly, they could just charge $5 a kilowatt hour and just make all the money in the world because they're, a regulated monopoly. They're the only ones licensed to sell power. But because of that, regulations exist so that they can't just take all the money they want from the customers. They have to play fair as a monopoly. So basically, as consumption goes up, the prices have to come down because the utilities are only allowed to make so much profit. So it's really the first glimpse of the future that we are eventually going to see of really abundant clean energy and the prices starting to come down. This is a somewhat artificial prices starting to come down because it's more from the regulations than from anything. But it's a glimpse of the future. The more electricity is made, the more money the utilities make, and the less they have to charge people.
Well, that's an interesting study.
per
Yeah,
kilowatt
where
hour.
was that study? Electric Autonomy Canada.
Electric Autonomy Canada is the website, and the report is called Electric Vehicles Are Driving Rates Down, and it's a study that looked at 3 California utilities.
Very interesting stuff. So Google that if you want to know more. Tokyo mandates rooftop solar. This is interesting because Japan has kind of poo-pooed solar and wind. They should have been on top of this a long time ago, and they're only now doing it. And nuclear has been shut down for many years now since the Fukushima disaster, and they shut down a lot of their nuclear. You'd think they would have just hopped on the renewables right away, but they haven't. But now they're really starting to come on board. The Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly has approved new provisions to make solar installations mandatory for new homes. The rules apply to homes with total rooftop areas of more than 20 square meters and to buildings with rooftops smaller than 2,000 square meters. So some other buildings too that aren't homes. They will also require businesses to install solar arrays on 30% of the rooftop surfaces. Some parts of the city could face requirements for 85% of all rooftops to be covered by PV. That's pretty significant. The new rules will require developers and installers to use solar panels from manufacturers that respect human rights too. So there's some rules in there that you can't just buy any solar panels. And Japan is not a solar panel manufacturer to my knowledge, so I'm not sure if that means not China or what that means exactly, because I haven't heard about solar panels coming from a place that doesn't respect human rights aside from China, which is quite obvious and arguable. We seem to put up with it because half our stuff comes from China and 3/4 of our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've got all these rooftops all over the world. They eventually will have all kinds of solar on them, and that will lead to the kind of abundance that we are planning for and hoping for that will make electricity even cheaper in the future.
This is for new homes, okay, not existing homes. But, we're kind of at a threshold now where if you're building something, you might as well include the solar because it's probably a bit cheaper to factor the solar in when you're building a home. The wiring and everything is already pre-done and accommodating for the solar. And why not? I mean, yeah, you're outlaying a bit more money. It's kind of like adding 5% to super insulate, but then you save that 5% in a short period of time that pays for that. And it could be a few years. It could be less.
Yeah, no, building codes have to change and plan for the future for sure. Okay, so we often talk about wind turbines on the show, often gigantic wind turbines. And I find this stuff super fascinating, just almost based on the size alone. As we've discussed, these things are incredibly huge and long and difficult to transport. So there's a story here this week on Electrek. World's most powerful wind turbine blades arrive for installation. So this is in Denmark. These are 15 megawatt wind turbines. These are, if not the biggest.
The big ones, yeah.
The big ones, yeah. This is 15 megawatts is around the biggest in the world right now. But I wanted to mention it because
offshore, we should point out. Because
that's right. These are offshore wind turbines, which are the biggest ones. And but yeah, that sent me down a bit of a YouTube rabbit hole, which I thought was really interesting. Vestas is the company that makes these in Denmark, and they've got a really interesting YouTube channel where they show you some of the process of how they make these things. And so step number one is a gigantic long factory. Like the factory is just super, super long, and everything in it, all the equipment is all super, super long. They make some of these things in molds. So they have to have these giant molds that are like, my God, like, football fields long, that then they have to then open up and somehow get these things out and transport them. But the YouTube channel, like, it's a promotion for the company. So it's, it's a little bit of like slick promotion, but you also get to see actually how these things are kind of built, which I found totally fascinating.
Yeah. And they are building these factories sometimes now. If you have a really large offshore wind installation, they'll build them right at the shore. Yeah. Because, as we said before, the hard part is transporting on roads because, it's very hard. Yeah, especially the offshore ones.
That was one thing I was wondering about. Yeah, it's like it would make sense to, but these factories are not they're not cheap or easy to build. So, they'd have to kind of think twice about, where they're going to put them. But, it makes sense to build a new factory right by the shore.
And maybe they can make the factories modular, like the World Cup stadium that they're taking apart and putting somewhere else.
Is that
I don't know, but we talked about that a couple shows ago. So that's, it's the blades that can't be modular. Like you can put little tubes on top. Like they're building, unfortunately, they're building a cell phone tower half a block away from me now, a big one. Early 5G. So they're, the tube that is the structure in the middle is modular. You put one little tube on top of another until it gets up there. But the blade can't be, I don't think anyone's invented a blade that is not one piece yet.
Right. Yeah.
And these blades
one of those
football field size, literally, like and beyond.
Yeah. No, there's one of those cell towers going up near me, and I was surprised how big around it is.
Yeah, me too. Mine's not up yet, so we'll see how big it gets.
Yeah.
Maybe it's to give us faster communication for the clean energy show. I don't know.
Let's hope.
Yeah, so Lyft is going to incentivize EV owners. Lyft is the, what do you call it, ride sharing? App-based ride sharing. Uber and Lyft are two different companies, the main ones, I think, in the United States and Canada and many other parts of the world. Drivers in California, this is California only, who own EVs can earn an extra $150 a week. So if this is your job and you're not making a killing doing this, an extra $150 a week or $600 a month ain't bad.
Yeah,
for owning an EV. I mean, Brian, in the States with the incentives and the things and the this and the that, you could probably use half that just for the lease of an EV. So if you're not driving an EV in California, you work for Lyft, you're crazy. Go buy an EV, sell your beater or whatever you're driving and get a brand new EV with full warranty coverage. And that will cover the cost plus your gas. My goodness, this is a great incentive, actually. It caps out at $8,100, apparently. As long as I guess if you you get $150 for each week you complete at least 50 Lyft rides. So it's not for your casual person, but it's that's not crazy either. So the bonus caps out at $8,100, and that's a fifth of the cost of a $40,000 new electric vehicle. So yeah, a 5-year lease. This is basically it's covering the cost of a vehicle, right? I mean, that's essentially what this is doing. And then you save a crap load on gas, a crap load, especially if you can charge at home for part of that time.
No, that's amazing.
So at EV, there's another advantage here, Brian. At EV Go fast charging stations, they receive a percentage discount up to 45% off if the EV Go fast charging stations are working. And if it's chilly, or if there's a bit of humidity in the air, or if the moon is full, they will not be working. So that's up to 45% off for if you have gold and platinum reward status on the platform. That's because, ostensibly you would charge at home and probably have to top up at some point during the day if you're doing it full time or did a long shift. So boom, or I don't know what the charges are compared to home, but you might actually be competitive with home and just do a fast charge on the road. And at non-EV Go public charging stations, Lyft drivers can use Lyft's debit card, Lyft Direct it's called, to get 1% to 7% cash back. And at home, the company is providing a discount of $140 off level 2 chargers from Wallbox, which is about 20% off. That's decent. That's one great way a company can decarbonize, and it makes perfect sense.
No, that's great. Okay, so we've got a story here from Hydrogen Inside, which is a website that covers the hydrogen industry. And I just thought it was interesting because it reminded me of what we were talking about a few weeks ago with the Apple iPhone. So Apple has introduced a clean charging feature on your phones. I looked for it on mine. It's only available in the US, so I couldn't see it. It wasn't available in Canada yet. But I think with the latest operating system on your iPhone, if you go into the battery section and you choose the sort of battery charging section under the settings, you can set your iPhone so that it will charge when the grid is cleanest. So in the US, apparently they have figured out when the grid is cleanest, And so, if everybody follows that with their iPhones, it can actually make a difference in terms of carbon intensity. But this is sort of vaguely, it's a much simplified explanation, but they're looking to do something similar in the hydrogen industry, because one of the issues with hydrogen is it's best to make it from clean energy sources, right? If you make hydrogen from purely solar and wind, it's a very, clean, green technology. But if you're getting your power from the grid to make hydrogen, it can be varying degrees of dirty. And so, true green hydrogen is made from clean, reliable sources. But the article here on Hydrogen Insight is hourly electricity matching is the only reliable way to reduce emissions from green hydrogen. And it's basically a similar kind of thing of, we really have to keep track of where the energy is coming from if we're going to make proper, clean, green hydrogen.
That's good, because there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to be saying that ours is blue, purple, gray, and you don't know what that means. You don't really know how good their hydrogen is, how clean it is. So this will be one way to keep track of that. Now, one of the problems I have in looking for a electric car is the chip shortages, which have, this screwed up everything. They've made my Prius extremely expensive on the used market, which is a good thing, but it's been kind of weird. So chip shortages are going to continue through 2023, says an article in Ars Technica. We expect continued disruption to the global semiconductor industry, and therefore continued supply chain shortages in the automotive industry through 2023, according to a new report in the Financial Times. So that report was originally in the Financial Times. The head of Onsemi said there's nothing you can do now to change 2023. It's set in stone, basically. We'll be adding capacity every quarter, every month in 2023 to meet our demand, but still not going to happen. The problem began during the pandemic and is associated with shutdowns around the world. So what happened is, the pandemic shutdowns way back in 2020 in March and afterwards, the automakers shut down temporarily. So the chip makers said, okay, you don't want our chips, we're going to start filling orders for other people who do want them. And now that the automakers want them again, they can't get them. It's as simple as that. So as vaccines became available and production restarted, the silicon factories that would have made chips for automakers had already switched production capacity to other customers, and chip plants are running flat out to meet demand. And they have been for some time, but have warned that the problem was not going to be solved anytime soon. Consequently, automakers have had to reduce production. It's a terrible time to be an automaker nowadays, or even idle certain lines of their cars and trucks and SUVs. In some cases, car companies have shipped vehicles minus certain features due to being unable to get the semiconductors needed to have those features. Example, Brian, General Motors has had to revise its plan to build 400,000 electric vehicles by the end of 2023. And that's been pushed back 6 months because of the chip shortage, which is too bad. That's not good. We wish that would not happen. And the analysts at Auto Forecast Solutions expect the chip shortage will result in around 3 million fewer vehicles being built in 2023, which means that for me, my used car is still expensive, so I don't have too much pressure, although my mortgage is becoming due and we got to wrap up our line of credit, and, I don't want to fold that into the new mortgage, and, it's just hell. In fact, we're working on the mortgage application as we speak, because it has to be in tonight, because apparently our mortgage broker said there could be another rate increase that we want to avoid.
Yikes.
So anyway, Brian, Let's talk about the year in review after this. 2022, Brian, has been a fairly incredible year that started with Mr. Putin, that piece of garbage, that vodka-drenched piece of garbage invading Ukraine, and that actually helped clean energy.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, but it is true. It really helped spark everybody towards getting off of fossil fuels because nobody wanted Putin's oil and
And I'm
gas.
sure he wanted the opposite. He wanted gas prices to go up, which they did. But then people said, no, you're not going to take advantage of this. We're not going to buy your gas. And that's caused everyone else who needed their gas to come up with Plan B. Plan B being a heat pump, for one,
Yeah.
to get off natural gas heating
And
for buildings.
and things like, the US agreeing to ship more liquefied natural gas to Europe, things like that is an interim step, but of course, clean energy being the total solution.
And, second to that, and perhaps the biggest thing, is the Inflation Reduction Act, the weirdly named Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, which was a shock when it happened because nobody thought it would. Manchin was against it. Suddenly, one day, they announced there was an agreement, and the world just jaws dropped to the ground. And we talked to people in Bloomberg who were, completely gobsmacked, but they had no idea this was coming. And what a great surprise that! What a great day that was in August when that happened. And I mean, it took a while to realize, and people are still talking about how incredible this is. Like, this is set in stone for 10 years. You can't undo it because they want people to invest. You can't invest in something if it changes. So solar manufacturing, we'll see how that goes in the United States. But sourcing of minerals, it's going to boost. And if boosting the United States boosts the world, because the United States is a big economy. Okay, so this is a big boost for everybody. EVs mandated, trucking mandated, charging infrastructure, billions and trillions of dollars. It's just incredible. And you can't understate it. And it ripples throughout the world. Like, there's France. People are upset that it's kind of a protectionist policy when it comes to some things, when it comes to the EVs having to be built there. And Canada we're in a really good position for green renewable energy investment. And now people are saying, well, no one's going to invest in Canada. So why do it here when you can do it in the United States? Even Canadians. So Canada is trying to come up with an answer to that. And that's going to take some serious policy to match what they just pulled out of their butt, seemingly at the, quickly.
Yeah, but the reality of the world is that the U.S. is often the driver of these kinds of big moves. And, the U.S. was really slow for a long time, maybe even going backwards in terms of clean energy. But the U.S. often sets the tone, particularly for us here in Canada, but really for a lot of the world. And they set the tone by making this incredibly large investment in clean, green technology, which is great.
What do you think is the most important EV of the year as far as moving things forward on climate change, and the most significant EV that came out?
I would have to say the Ford F-150 electric, the Lightning. That's, this is the heart of America. That truck is so much a part of the world where we live, not just America, but here in Canada, the Ford F-150 is so ubiquitous. They're just everywhere. People here in North America love their giant, big pickup trucks.
Number one selling vehicle, period, in North America.
And of course, traditionally a very gas-guzzling vehicle. Well, now there's an electric version from Ford. They're making a decent amount of them. They're still not fully ramped up yet, but
the crazy thing is apparently you can buy one. Somebody pointed out that there's one in a lot waiting to be bought where we live. I think that was a canceled order or something like that. Or actually there was a small used one that got returned. So, and the one guy that I've been reading about who has one locally, he says, you couldn't tear that from my hands. Like I'm not, and he put a diesel heater in his just so he could have all of his range in the wintertime. Because he's a contractor who tows and does a lot in rural places. So he's got lots of miles to put on, but yeah, he loves it. I think the EV curve, the EV adoption S curve, we've reached an inflection point there. That really seems to be happening. I mean, you don't feel it in North America as much, but you look at the numbers around the world, 15%, 18% of new car sales. We're there, and it's just accelerating. And the rate is accelerating year on year, too, is incredible.
Yeah, no, technology can move with an S adoption curve, which means starts a little bit slow, then goes vertical, then levels off. And we are definitely at the inflection point where this is starting to go vertical. And, electric car adoption is going to go fast from here.
And let's declare it the year of the heat pump. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had hardly heard about heat pumps before. One of the first,
and then you started listening to our show.
I started listening. It's a good show. One of the first places I've seen it was when I was shopping for pool heaters on Costco. On their website, they had 2 or 3 heat pump pool heaters.
Wow.
And I thought, what are these? Where did these come from? Like, since when do people, I know they're thousands of dollars, but cheaper to use than electric heat. That's for sure. You don't really want to use electric heat to heat your pool, and natural gas heat is kind of not great either. These are, quite something that these things exist, and they're selling so many of them that, look out.
No, and I was just watching a video on YouTube the other day about warm board, which is like a in-floor heating technology for homes, for, building particularly new homes. It's just, there's lots of types of in-floor heating, but this is just the one that I happened to see, a company called Warm Board, and they've partnered with a heat pump company so that you can put in a sort of an Arctic type heat pump to heat the fluid that goes through your floor and heat your house. And this stuff is all happening quicker than even I would have thought.
That's incredible, because, you would have a boiler, a natural gas boiler where we live. I don't know what other people are doing. And you would put plumbing through your floor. And these guys are just saying they're designing the whole thing around the heat pump for in-floor heating, which is, may I say, a great idea for your new cottage.
It's a great idea. And one of the things they mentioned in the video, because of course, when they started doing this, it was all natural gas boilers that they were doing this with, but they started looking at, oh, hey, look at that. California, they're outlawing, gas heaters in 2025 or 2030. And, that kind of thing has been outlawed. So if you're a forward-thinking company, you start looking at heat pumps to do this in-floor heating rather than, gas boilers.
Well, what else do you think was important this year?
Well, just on that sort of S adoption curve, I wanted to mention in Norway, this is a story that just came out a couple of days ago. I'm reading it here on Clean Technica. So we often talk about Norway as being on the forefront of EV adoption because they've got very friendly regulations. Now, almost 90% of new car sales in Norway are plug-in. A few of those are plug-in hybrids, but it's in the 85% range or 82% or something for full electric. Anyway, there was a new record just set. So in Norway, there was a record for the most cars sold of one particular model. And this record goes back to 1969, and it was the Volkswagen Beetle. So in 1969, the Volkswagen Beetle sold 16,699 units in Norway back in 1969. And that record was just broken by the Tesla Model Y.
Wow.
They have sold 16,701 Tesla Model Ys in Norway, and there's a few days left in the year. So that's a 53-year-old record and broken by an electric car, which is cool.
So the Model Y will be as ubiquitous in 2023 as the Beetle was in 69.
Yeah, and you and I grew up in the 70s, and there were Beetles everywhere, and I've always loved Beetles. I've always kind of wanted one. I like the new Beetle.
Really?
I've never owned one. Yeah, and if you think about the advancements in the vehicles themselves, like I love Beetles, but they're a pretty crude car. That was one of the things that was great about them. The original Beetles, you could fix them yourself. They were so simple and easy and cheap. But you think about the advance in technology now with the Tesla Model Y and the built-in computer and navigation and everything and the safety of them. I would not be wanting to drive around in a 1969 Beetle. It would, the safety compared to today's cars is a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy locally here. We see him at the EV car shows that refurbished a Beetle and made it electric. I don't even know if he's using lithium batteries. I can't remember. He's probably a show listener. Write us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com.
Yeah, let us know.
But yeah, I see that all the time, and he loves it. Of course, it's it's just fun to drive.
Yeah, and I believe the Clean Energy Show on YouTube, they did an episode about a Volkswagen Beetle conversion to electric.
We're the Clean Energy Show on YouTube. What do you mean?
Or what did I
You
say?
said the Clean Energy Show. That's us. This show is way too long, Brian.
The fully charged.
You're a tired old man. You can't handle shows this long.
Yes, I meant fully charged. We often talk about Tony Seba. And Tony Seba is a prognosticator in the world of new technologies.
He's a futurist is what he is.
A futurist. He released a few videos this year. I mean, he has the same kind of presentation, but he occasionally updates it. And so if you go to the Tony Seba channel on YouTube, you can see his latest round, and he split it into 5 parts of his basically slide lecture where he talks about his predictions. And so we talked about a few of them as he re-released this latest version of the talk a couple of months ago. But we never talked about the final episode. So part 5 in the series, it's the real good news part of the clean energy story. I think I hesitated even to talk about it at the time because it seems too good to be true. Like this prediction of his about where we're headed. I mean, I think it's a great news story to end the year on if we want to talk about the good news that's happening in clean energy. But his prediction from this final episode of his slide lecture series is that 90% of the economy can be decarbonized by 2035 in the key sectors of energy, transportation, and food. These are the key industries that are going to be disrupted by technology in the coming years. So energy, of course, solar, wind, and batteries. Transportation, of course, electric vehicles. And with food, it's microfermentation and the ability to make food, which is not quite so carbon intensive and going to be more localized. Things like, getting food from cows is very carbon intensive and really one of the worst things we can do for the environment. But that's his prediction that in those 3 sectors, energy, transportation, and food, 90% of the economy can be decarbonized by 2035. And it's just going to happen because these things are better and cheaper. And he, thinks we can go net negative by 2040, which is, within sight. That's, you and I will probably even still be alive then.
Speak for yourself. We'll see how Christmas goes. A lot of sweets around, a lot of desserty things. So
yeah, so I don't know. It sounds almost too good to be true. But if you believe in the S curve of adoption, which we were just talking about for electric vehicles, we're at that inflection point. We should be at the top of that S curve, perhaps by 2035. The demand for oil is going to plummet, and the economy will decarbonize because all of these things are better and cheaper.
Well, Eric in California has written us again, and thank you, Eric, for doing so. We appreciate everyone who takes the time to drop us a note. We can't thank you enough because it just means a lot to us to hear from our listeners. It says, "Hi again, James and Brian. The California Public Utilities Commission has finally passed the solar killer rules," which I believe he brought up before in the show. This is significant because California is the leader in solar adoption in the United States. Apparently, according to this article which he sent us, those of us who have already have solar should remain in our current program for 20 years. Thank goodness for small favors. So thanks, Eric in California. Yes, it is nasty what they are doing. They are reducing the amount that they pay you to feed solar to the grid down to like 2 or 3 cents or something. It's not great, and it's a little premature, I would say. We're not quite ready for something like that.
No, that's nasty. And, we just discussed Tokyo mandating solar panels on buildings in other jurisdictions, and I will include our own in that here in Saskatchewan. Shame on you, Sask Power, for killing solar here as well. James and I are in the old program, and as far as we know, there's no time limit on it. We're grandfathered into the old rate, which is basically our power meter will run forwards and backwards at the same rate. They changed that, so they're now discouraging solar here because they're not paying the full rate; they're paying half the rate.
Their excuse, Brian, was we don't want other people to have to pay more for their electricity who don't want solar panels, because we're getting it off too. We're making it too cheap for ourselves.
There's another way to do that. This is a climate emergency. Yeah. There are some grids that get it and some that don't, and California traditionally has been very good for this. So this is a very weird reversal for them. I don't know what they're worried about, but yeah,
power companies are private and they're lobbying the government and crying to them on their shoulders. We'd love to hear from our listeners. It's the lifeblood that gets us up in the morning, people. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's our email address, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We're on TikTok. Go follow us there if you'd like to see visuals on YouTube. Our handle on social media is Clean Energy Pod. Leave us a voicemail. Thrill us. Make us go yay by speaking into your microphone on your computer or phone at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. That's basically an online voicemail service, and we love that. But right now, it is time for the lightning round. I lied, Brian. It's not time for the lightning round. The time for the lightning round was an hour ago. It was ages ago. It was yesterday.
Look, it's the year-end spectacular.
Yes.
We're going
well,
long.
This is how we end the shows. We do it with a fast-paced look at the week in clean energy and climate news. So let's not dawdle. The new year is coming. Electric says Tesla Megapack, the country's utility-scale energy storage battery system, could be sold out for almost the next 2 years, according to Tesla's own timeline. A single Megapack unit is a container-sized, a shipping container-sized 3 megawatt-hour battery system with integrated modules, inverters, and thermal systems. What do you think?
Yeah, well, everyone's scaling up battery production, but the thirst for batteries is so huge that, there's going to be still shortages of batteries for the next few years.
Headline, climate negligence bill could let New Yorkers sue fossil fuel companies. And this, Brian, is hilarious. Let me get to it. The climate negligence bill will allow private New Yorkers to sue. I've run out of steam myself. I'm not going to make it to the end. The climate negligence bill, which would allow private New Yorkers to sue fossil fuel companies for climate damages, is modeled after, get this, sit down for this one, the Texas abortion law. This is how they decided to fight abortion in Texas, to let people sue. If you knew somebody, you could sue them for getting an abortion or giving abortion services. Yeah. Well, they modeled it after that, but for a good reason, for the climate. Texas controversial 2021 law by state Republican lawmakers empowered private citizens to sue people who aid and abet an abortion. The Supreme Court declined to block the law. And guess what? Supreme Court, your thinking is now going to do something good for the world. And I know you don't like good things. There is public support for fossil fuel companies to be held responsible for damages caused by climate change. And I know you like suing fossil fuels, Brian.
Yeah, no, challenging them in the courts has been a great thing. It's been very effective in certain cases. I've mentioned before, there's a great podcast called What Roman Mars Can Learn About Con Law. And they talk about some of these kinds of issues. The decisions lately of the Supreme Court in the U.S., they've really gone against precedent. They've gone against, the history of the court. It's been a very weird turn to the court. But, they've now established these new precedents. And it turns out these new precedents can be used for things like what you just talked about.
And speaking of creative litigation, 16 municipalities in Puerto Rico are using the same racketeering legislation used to bring down mob bosses and fraudsters against oil and coal companies, which is basically the same thing, accusing them of conspiring to deceive the public for decades over the climate crisis. Good for them.
If that's not racketeering, I don't know what is.
The richest people in the UK use more energy flying than the poorest do overall, according to Carbon Brief, who reported on this study. So, yeah, just the rich people flying. One rich person flying uses more than a poor person does in a whole year just for their flying.
And I feel like it's probably worse here. I think where we live, the highest carbon footprint per person is probably where James and I live.
Well, it's time for a Clean Energy Show Fast Fact. Amazon produced enough plastic packaging in 2021 to wrap the Earth more than 800 times in air pillows. That is from an Oceana report quoted in EcoWatch. 800 times wrap the entire planet in a pillow wrap.
Yeah, so Amazon, of course, they've got the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. Amazon is trying to go all electric with their delivery vehicles, but it's a difficult business to try and, make eco-friendly.
Yeah, it is. With the flights, I mean, I live in a place, well, we live in a place. You live in the same place. All the flights from Memphis and the other hub, the shipping hubs, they fly over our house, Brian, every day. If I'm sitting sunning my ass in the pool in the summertime and I look up, I see all these 747s going to China via Anchorage, where they refuel. It's cheaper to stop and refuel than it is to carry the full load of fuel. It's constant. It's just constant. If you look at the flight tracking software, it's nonstop. The flights coming back and forth. It's a great year for solar generation in the EU in 2022. Guess what? It's up 47% vis the year before. And it's a record-breaking 41.4 gigawatts, expected to hit 60 in the coming year. So that's another 50% gain. That's it's on fire, so to speak. Top 5 countries: Germany, 8 gigawatts. And, Germany's a cloudy country. Much cloudier than most of North America. Spain came in second, a close second, and Poland, Netherlands, and France was down at about 2.7. They're starting to catch up. Ars Technica, Porsche's synthetic gasoline factory, is coming online this week in Chile. The plant will scale up from 34,000 gallons to 14.5 million gallons by 2024. Now, right now, most of this is going to be used in Porsche's racing car, just so they can have race car events with Porsches that have, sustainable fuel, supposedly. Synthetic.
Interesting. And that's a lot of, they need that much fuel for racing
cars?
Porsche
is very, apparently, probably, because they train and they do there's probably lots of different racing car series. So this is, the Porsche wants to keep combustion engines going. And I understand that, in a world where everything's an EV, you might want a Porsche. Some people will, like a combustion engine. There'll be a fancy for that. And this is one way that they see of getting around it, is we're using synthetic gasoline that is sustainably produced. So the U.S. deployed 5.19 gigawatt hours or 1.44 gigawatt energy storage last year. 91% was on the grid. The rest would be in people's homes and businesses. No, this is not last year. This is Q3 of 2022. Close to half the entire amount of storage installed in 2021. So half and 1/4 of the previous year. So that's pretty cool. California and Texas accounted for almost all of it. So Texas is, there's a lot of green energy in Texas, even though the politicians go around blaming falsely, still to this day, for power outages. EU natural gas prices have fallen by close to 40% over the last week, so that they are now nearly back to the level before the Russian invasion. I think it's because the weather hasn't gone crazy yet there. But if you get our bomb cyclone moving, look out, because it's going to get cold. We're almost done the show, Brian. GM Cruise of robotaxis have started service in Tesla's Austin, Texas. So now the people in Austin, including what's his name, are going to see robotaxis driving around and doing what FSD is nowhere near being able to do. So that's interesting. By the way, we'll end the show this week on this good news story. An F-150 Lightning, that's the all-electric Ford pickup truck that was at a dealership in California that lost its power due to a major earthquake, kept the whole stinking business going. In fact, they had 3 cars on the lot, a couple of other used EVs. They all had them going. The Ford can output lots of electricity via their outlets. And they kept, they said on Facebook, we're open for business. This is a picture of our Ford powering our business. The cashier registers are going. If you want parts, the lights are on, come on down. So that is really cool. And it's one of those major things, right, of EVs.
Yeah, no, they have all kinds of outlets in the back for powering a dealership, but, usually a work site.
Well, that is more than our time for this year. If you are listening to us before the holidays, we want to wish you a happy holiday if you celebrate in any way, or even if you don't and you're using the time off to get together with family and friends, we wish you the best. And as always, call us, email us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. check us out. Thanks to all who have donated in the past week. We continue to receive donations for people buying us coffee. There's a link in the show notes if you ever want to do that. And we're so grateful to the people who have. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app so you want to get new episodes. Big show, our biggest in history, Brian. Happy New Year to you and Merry Christmas and all that, and to our listeners as well.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next year.